Hello and welcome to the Tom's Hardware Show. I'm Sharon and today we're sharing our thoughts on this year's all virtual CES 2021. So let's kick things off live. So as always, we're live and taking questions from the audience. If you have any questions or comments you'd like to share, just drop it into the chat on Facebook or YouTube, and we'll try to discuss it live on air. So I've got a couple of my Tom's Hardware friends here with me to weigh in on what was a pretty strange CES. Andrew Friedman, Tom's Hardware Senior Editor, and Michelle Earhart, Tom's Hardware Staff Writer. So the title of today's show is Best and Worst of CES, and I want to start with the worst so we can end on a high note. And for me, the worst was, of course, the fact that we weren't there. We couldn't get our hands on the products, we couldn't demo their features or test their durability, so it really made experiencing the products and making an assessment for readers a challenge. What do you guys think?
I mean, I strongly agree with you there. I mean, a lot of people who work really hard on the new tech, like work really hard to make this seem as normal as possible, to make it as informative as possible to us, so that we could tell our readership and people like you who are watching what's going to be exciting this year. But the truth is, there really is something to being on the ground, getting to ask people questions in person, getting to feel and try and and look. And I know for like a lot of people watching, like, oh, like you missed a trip to Vegas, like but it's actually like a lot of work, but B, like I think we are able to provide better service when we are there. Again, there is a pandemic. It's like obviously very important we are all staying here and not creating a giant super spreader event.
Right.
But I definitely miss that.
I think, my favorite part of CES coverage, I know I joined Tom's Hardware recently, but I always like seeing the unusual, sort of weirder, unexpected stuff coming out of CES. And it feels like because companies are more virtual this year, they're able to keep things a lot closer to their chest than they usually do. And so even the more unusual stuff like the Razer RGB mask is still mostly concepts and slides. And, we're Tom's Hardware, but it feels like this year, not by choice, we've almost become Tom's Vaporware in a bit. It's just, we're not 100% sure when or if we're going to see some of the things that companies showed off this year.
It's actually like a typical problem of CES. Like there are a lot of things where you'll see them and then they never come out. Like that is just typical of even the most major announcements. But one thing I think was among perhaps the worst, like if we're keeping in worst, is that the current conditions of the market make that much more possible. And that there are, I think, a record amount of things we've saw this year without prices and without like even like, oh, we think this will be the release date. And a lot of that has to do with the market conditions, about being able to get shipping, for a number of reasons. Like people are shipping medical supplies and vaccines, like, oh, they can't get space on planes. Or maybe it's because there are tariffs. And so if there's tariffs, they don't know what they can price things at right now. So a lot of things are being launched and we're like, we really hope we're going to see this. We really hope people are going to be able to afford it. We hope we're going to try it, but we're not sure when in the year that's going to be. And so that's kind of a minus. And again, like that's not necessarily a pandemic problem, but it's a market issue we had this year.
One of the things I missed this year was I didn't get to do a lot in terms of VR. So there aren't necessarily like always like big VR announcements at the show, but that's often where I get to try some of the smaller niche products like VR gloves or VR shoes and things like that. And a lot of times, like obviously you need to try it out to see how it feels, to see how accurate the tracking is, how good the experience is, and a lot of like especially with VR, and I'd say also with robotics, a lot of the you get your press materials and you see their website and it looks cool, but when you try it out on the show floor, like you realize it sucks because it doesn't work, or you're freaking nauseous because have bad VR glove tracking. So I didn't really get to do a lot in terms of like VR or even like AR, mixed reality. That was something that you really need to go be there to try in person. So I didn't really get to do that this year. So yeah, and as our editor-in-chief Abram points out, it's the things you're not supposed to see. So it kind of ties into that too. Like we get a lot of funny PR pitches, I guess, but like with the smaller companies, you really got to like check it out to see if there's any value in it, and that's just something we couldn't really do.
Exactly.
You also get those types of things where like, oh, I'm in between meetings. Let me go look over here for a minute. Like, let me go look in this weird startup area. And you find this thing that like, if you had stumbled upon it sort of by accident, then maybe you wouldn't tell anybody about it, but you did, and it's there. And like, okay, I had some fun talking to these people. Let me tell other people about it. Where in this case, it's like, oh, it's in a pile of 800 other emails. It's likely to get missed. So that sense of discovery was lost a little bit.
Yeah, but our feet are less tired, right?
Yeah.
I slept in my own bed every night.
With systems and chips and GPUs, to a degree, you can kind of get a grasp of those from specs. Not saying that testing isn't important, but with peripherals, especially, I feel like it's very important to get hands-on to see how they feel, because you're going to be feeling them all the time. And
I disagree with you more, Michelle. I feel like the systems have that same thing. Like sometimes you get something and like, oh, it's like this is a $1,500 computer and it doesn't feel like it should, or oh, this is $600, but it feels really premium. So I feel like that's for every type of thing you get.
I love the briefings we had where they were like, it feels premium, I promise. It feels sturdy.
That's very true.
So Abram's asking, what's the coolest thing you ever stumbled upon at CES? I want to say Andrew's been probably to the most CESs out of the three of us here. Do you have a thought? I need to think about it.
One thing I always think of, and this is probably not the coolest thing in that I don't think it exists anymore, but the type of thing you might stumble upon is like there's this whole startup area. And I remember once going in and like there was this guy who just had like the stack of envelopes and a whole bunch of rechargeable batteries. And they were pitching a business, because you gotta remember that's really what CES is there for. It's people like making a lot of business deals. The journalists covering the new announcements is just kind of icing on the cake. There's a lot of backroom people talking, buying, things like that. So this guy's got a stack of the envelope and a stack of the batteries, and I don't even remember what they're called anymore. But their idea was that you would take these batteries and you would use them to recharge, and you'd buy them at like your local coffee shop. And then you would put them in the mail and send them back, and they would be recycled and cycled through again. There was this whole idea of like, that's how people would recharge in the future. Was it a great idea? I don't know. At the time, it seemed pretty interesting before wireless charging was super widespread. And like those are the types of like weird things. There's a lot of like small accessories that don't get covered because they're not made by like Logitech or someone like that. Or like, and people like, I remember seeing the first ever Nintendo Switch projector I ever saw in a small like back corner of the convention center. Or there's a lot of companies that are like completely that they're not in the United States and not big brands. They're actually like some of the original manufacturers like that own factories have little booths, and sometimes you can get a little bit of insight. So I think those are all like little things you kind of miss.
Yeah. So now that I got a minute to think about it, I mean, I have alternate realities on my mind, I guess, but CS is kind of where we get to try those really, really premium VR headsets that are like geared toward enterprises, and like the Pimax set or lineup, for example. I tried the 8K there. So that's like the type of resolution you won't be able to find in consumer headsets like the Oculus. And, they'll have like the flight simulations and like real training for like helicopter flight and things like that. And it's just a totally different experience than playing like Beat Saber on your Oculus Quest. So yeah, that's definitely a rare opportunity that I missed.
Like last year, I saw like one VR one that had like these gloves and like arm pads that were doing heat and cold for VR. And like, I have no idea who they were anymore, but it was something cool to see.
How do you feel about that kind of tech that's like cool to see and stuff that you're not going to see elsewhere, but because you're not going to see it elsewhere, like it's unlikely that many people will end up getting their like hands on it eventually?
I mean, that's sort of what CES is. Like on the one hand, like I said, like it's us covering new announcements, but the other side of it is a whole bunch of people making business dealings, selling products to, your big box stores or trying to get investors. So it is possible that the next cool thing you find will be a trend. But of course, for every one big trend that makes it, there are 300 that or more that fail.
A lot of prototypes.
Yeah, and it's also just cool to know like what's possible. Like even if I'm not going to use smell-o-vision in my VR, it's cool to know that it works, or maybe it doesn't work great, but that it's possible and it's being worked on. And it's like you have an inside like tip. Well, I guess that's also a point of CES of like things to come though too. Yeah, and as Avram points out, that technology might end up somewhere else, even if it's not in the exact product that you've seen. So like I said, I know we've been like kind of complaining a little bit, but it's just gonna give you a little insight as to what it's like covering the show virtually. It's definitely been memorable, but like we said, we still got to learn about a lot of upcoming hardware, and we highlighted the best of them with our Tom's Hardware Best of CES Awards. 12 categories, I want to say, maybe 11, but I want to say 12 in total. So check out our website if you want to see them all, but let's talk about some of the picks that the three of us chose, Michelle and Andrew. How about best gaming laptop? Because that was a tough one this year.
Andrew, do you want to start us off?
Sure. The best gaming laptop was interesting because, well, I mean, for a few reasons. It was one of the few, well, I guess, of the computing categories where you get your laptop and your GPU both had changes, right? So AMD releases its Ryzen 5000 series CPUs, Intel releases its Tiger Lake H35 CPUs, and of course Nvidia releases the RTX 30 series line to basically all laptops. And so you get to this question of like, okay, which one is best using all of these technologies in the right way? And we had a whole lot of finalists for the gaming laptops. One really early one was the Asus Rog Flow X13, and that's the one that is a 2-in-1 that uses Ryzen 5000 and a 1650, and it folds, and then it has the proprietary connector that lets you put an RTX 3080 in there. And that, you know, that idea is really cool, but we also had a lot of debate, and I know this was really popular, about whether a proprietary connector is actually that cool, right? Like, and these are like really nerdy little like niche things we're talking about. Like, okay, like it's a new GPU. Are there other things that are neater? So I know we turned to a lot of the H35 things, the Msi Stealth 15M, the Acer Predator 300 SE, ones that like, okay, have gotten really thin. We were looking at things like the Lenovo Legion 7, right? That had the 16:10 screen, or the Razer Blade that was getting the QHD display. And so there are lots of little things like what is best making use of them. And I know and Michelle will tell you, we went back and forth on a lot of these.
Right. So
should we spoil the winner first of who it was, or should we get to that last?
I think we should save it just a little bit. So initially I went into gaming laptop wanting to, not going in thinking that the winner was going to be the Flow X13, but it was the most immediately attention grabbing thing that was on our list. But the more I thought about it, the more I thought like, well, the award is best gaming laptop, not best gaming laptop if you attach an eGPU. And if you don't attach the eGPU, the Flow X13 is a 1650 convertible. And that's neat to a degree, but aside from being convertible, it's not necessarily anything super as attention grabbing as it is with the GPU. And so the eGPU adds a ton to the price. It only works with the Flow X13 as of yet. It is a mobile RTX card, and you know that means it gets to cut down on space. But theoretically, if you're going to be docking the laptop into the eGPU anyway, space isn't as much of an issue there. So I'm not 100% sure how that eGPU is going to work out for Asus going forward. But if it gets more support, I think maybe their future laptops that use it would stand a better chance.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is the type of thing where you have a device that would have really wowed in person, right? And I think by like being distant from it, we didn't get to try, like not really getting to try it and see it in person and see how these things integrate and really how small this eGPU was. It was a thing that like got us thinking about all the other aspects of it, like a proprietary connection. So like, I can't wait for us to get this in so that we can try it, because it is an exciting idea that they can, get full PC, that they can get fuller speeds in Thunderbolt 3. But ultimately, we gave it to the Msi Stealth 15M. So that one has the RTX 3060 Max Q with the 35-watt Core i7 H series Tiger Lake. And the reasoning for that, it was one of two laptops that we saw using that. The other one was the Predator from Acer, but this one, frankly, looked a little cooler.
Yeah,
was a little bit thinner. So it was really a close race between those two. This one also had like the all aluminum and the black and white color options. And H35 is a little divisive, shall we say? Like, oh, okay, like their last processor is running at 28 watts. How big a change is this? But those weren't really going in gaming notebooks. So if you are someone who's gaming on the go or just gaming a little bit, this idea of like really ultra portable gaming laptops is enticing. So that's where our thoughts kind of went. Like full 3080 and something that small is impressive. Or sorry, 3060, 30 series is what I meant to say.
I mean, regardless of whether it's a 3080 or a 3060, seeing a 30 series GPU in a laptop that is 0.6 inches thick,
that's why it's a 3060,
is not the type of power that I'm used to seeing with that kind of form factor. And throw in that it has an H35 as well. If you compare it to desktop gaming, it's not as much of an improvement, but laptops don't always, hit that much power, right, Andrew?
Oh, the 35 watts?
Yeah.
Or the 28 watt laptop?
35 watts.
I mean, in any case of a laptop you get, like, especially with the mobile laptops, they don't always necessarily hit the TDP they're advertised to go up to. Like I've noticed in like as we've seen in some of the Tiger Lake ones that go up to 28 watts, not every cooling system can handle that. So we'll see how cooling systems work with the H series.
So just to clarify for some of the readers, so this is the Asus ROG Flow X13 that we were talking about with the eGPU. So yeah, it is a proprietary connection that they created in order to get the full use of Thunderbolt. Is that correct? Or to use all the PCIe lanes? There's a reason they made it.
Right. So they're not using Thunderbolt 3. They get the PCIe connection instead. And that is a lot faster. In theory, it's a lot faster. Again, this is something we didn't get to test because, we weren't there. But as I see some of the commenters saying, yeah, it's proprietary at the moment. The eGPU only works on that device. They could make it work on others. They haven't ruled it out as an entire possibility. But again, that's the ROG X13 and the XG Mobile. But at that point, it is locked to, Asus, and it is locked to that particular laptop. If they find success with it, who knows?
So Todd Harris is asking, it's still only 4 lanes, right? Or is it 4 Gen 4 at least? So I think it's Gen 4, right?
I believe it's X4 Gen 4.
Yeah. And then again, you can check out our website for more, but yeah, I believe it's X4 Gen 4. Yeah, so since we're on the topic of gaming, Todd has a GPU related question. Is there any chance whatsoever that Nvidia will have RTX 3060 cards at $329 in more than trace quantities? And how can Nvidia do $329 when add-in board partners are increasing prices due to tariffs? So we obviously don't have any like insider information on that, but what I can say in terms of availability, pretty much every GPU vendor we spoke to had no promises on better availability for 2021. Like there wasn't any magic wand that was waved that changed that situation. It's still, stock issues still remain. They did announce that price, but we also did speak to partners that talked about tariffs increasing prices, but those cards typically do have some sort of premium, especially if they're overclocked.
Yeah, it's tough with the 3060. I mean, they announced the 329. We gave that one our award for best GPU, by the way, because 12 gigabytes is kind of crazy. But I mean, look, and again, this is total speculation here, right? Like if I'm Nvidia, like I imagine 3060 is a volume seller as opposed to, the 3060 Ti maybe a little bit, but like not the 3070, not the 3080. Is there a possibility that they said, hey, look, this is going to sell a lot and they've been hoarding some of these? I hope so. I hope that people can get those at that price. Will they be able to? Nobody knows.
Yeah, that's definitely something we'll have to stay tuned throughout this year to see. I don't know. I think it's weird too. Like they're announcing a new card when we couldn't even get the new cards to just announce like a month or two.
Hope that they would be, keeping some stock just based on what happened with the previous cards, but every new release, it's the same issue nowadays.
Jared Walton, our graphics editor, did say that he's seen people get some by setting up, alerts, notifications for when they come in stock, but not a lot of people. We have a question from Ruru2M. Are you guys gonna have a Zoom party and get drunk? We had a food party last night.
I had a beer.
Andrew were waiting.
I had a soda. Thank you.
All right. So another tough one for us for the awards this year, I think, was on the CPU side, just because there wasn't much going on. Like I said, Andrew, I think you've been to the most CESs here, and like often chips make a huge splash. What are your thoughts on the CPU presence this year?
Sure. So we talked a lot with Paul Alcorn, who does a lot of our CPU coverage on this, and the Ryzen 5000 Mobile kind of won by default in a way. I mean, so Cezanne is just been extremely anticipated. We're seeing it in a lot more laptops now than they were. Like Lenovo's entire Legion series is taking that up, and some of the other stuff just didn't make as much of a splash. I mean, your other real choice was the Intel H35, which is again pretty divisive. I'm interested to see really thin laptops because I'm a systems guy, right? I see a lot of laptops, but otherwise, like if you're waiting for the real enthusiast stuff, the 45 watt chips, that's not here yet. So that just kind of like gives it to Ryzen sort of by default. You have Rocket Lake S, which was teased. That's the desktop chip. The 11th gen, the Core i9 11900K, which is just sort of like rewarming the old stuff, but getting it up to 19% instructions per clock increase. But that was kind of teased. Like we don't have like a specific release date or anything there. So it kind of went to Ryzen by default. It's like, hey, here's the best new Ryzen stuff, and it's going to be better than last year. Yeah.
At least there's that.
Speaking of talking to Paul Alcorn, I see he left a comment earlier. Should Intel be scared and or have nightmares? The H35 isn't that interesting of an announcement, but it's also not the only Intel news that we've had coming out of maybe not CES, but this week. Bob Swann is no longer head of Intel, correct?
He won't be as of in February. He's going to step down.
So thoughts about maybe how that'll affect them or their future announcements?
I mean, we were talking about this yesterday. Michelle, you pointed out that stocks were doing well after the announcement. I think that kind of gives you a little hint. His replacement has, I think, a pretty good reputation for his work at VMware. So I think people are pretty excited about that. Yeah, as well. What do you think, Andrew? And no, can I just take a break? Remember when we did what do you call it? We tried to pick, the draft for the new CEO, and they didn't even give us that chance this time.
Yeah, but so, I mean, I think he seems like a really good choice. Like, obviously, he's worked in engineering at Intel before. He has, he's been extremely successful at VMware. I don't think people should be like, oh man, by Computex, there's going to be this major announcement that they turn around. Like, it's just not how companies work like this. These are battleships. They're not cars, They still have a 7 nanometer process to fix. They definitely have some things they're just in production, and those are going to continue to spill out for a few years easily. So you got to give it some time for him to try to turn the ship around. But he does seem like he's got like a real, he's got a real serious background in this stuff. So there's definitely a chance for a turnaround here.
Yeah, Ruru2M is expecting Intel to come back with a vengeance in 2 to 3 years. So I guess we'll have to wait 2 to 3 years.
About that, but I think that's a fairer timetable than a couple of months.
Right.
I like the battleship, not a car analogy a lot.
Yeah, I mean, of course, look, companies are made by more than just the chief executive officer, right? It's like they have a lot of talent who is there. They've also lost a lot of talent. And so that's going to be one of his challenges is going to be to recruit that talent to make the next generation of Intel chips that really impress.
So yeah, if you haven't submitted a question already, definitely feel free to go ahead and drop one in. We'll do our best to answer it. We do have one from Tommy Henry asking when we'll be reviewing Intel's Rocket Lake S chips. I don't think we can tell you when, but I can promise you that the minute we're able to review it, Paul Alcorn is going to be all over it, and we'll be pretty quick with that one. Does anyone have any thoughts on expectations for how these chips will compare with AMD?
I mean, again, like it's kind of hard to say. It's hard to say. What Intel said about it, looks really good, but we don't know everything about it, so it's really hard to say.
Yeah, there also wasn't much new information about the chips this week, but I guess Intel had a busy week on its own accord. I wanted to ask you your thoughts, Michelle, because you, as well as Andrew, review lots and lots of laptops for the site. I'm curious what you're most interested to see in laptops this year overall. I feel like there are a few trends we saw. We know the new Ryzen mobile chips are coming out. We talked about Intel's H35. I think we saw a lot of other trends like slimmer builds and taller screens. What stands out to you for the laptops planned for this year?
I think there's two things that I'm looking forward to seeing more of. First being those slimmer builds. Normally when I look at a gaming laptop, it's between 0.8 and 1, maybe 1.1 inches thick. So I mean, part of the reason we gave the Msi Stealth 15M the best gaming laptop award is 0.6 inches thick. So that Intel H35 processor, those mobile RTX 30 series GPUs, I'm excited to see those actually starting to get integrated into more laptops, see those start to come out. Based on what we looked at, probably within this quarter, maybe next quarter, and starting to see, these laptops get more portable without losing as much power. Second thing is we've seen this a lot in productivity laptops, although I believe we saw a few gaming laptops this year, different aspect ratios. So 16:10 is becoming more popular. I don't think we're ever going to see a gaming laptop with like a 4:3 screen or anything like that. But any more screen space we can get, I appreciate.
Yeah, that's really important. Like the 16:9, we've had it for a few years, but that was made for TVs in the movie industry, right? And so, I mean, Lenovo moved its whole gaming lineup, and this is a gaming laptop, onto 16:10, which has typically been productivity focused. And I mean, the Dell XPS 13 for a long time, for a few years now, has been on 16:10. And that little bit of space, it just gives you so much extra work. But that's why one of the things, our best laptop choice, the ThinkPad X1 Titanium Yoga, is 3.2, which in my personal opinion, not speaking for all of Tom's Hardware, every laptop that's not a gaming laptop, that's a business laptop or a productivity laptop, should be 3.2. So,
why?
Because they are much taller, which means I can see much more of my writing or my coding or my spreadsheets without scrolling so much. I truly think 3x2 is the way to go on those types of things. You've seen Microsoft Surface devices are all 3x2. Acer went to 3x2 on one of its Swifts last year. The Titanium Yoga is 3x2. And I think for just pure working, I mean, look, if you're doing some stuff that you need a more widescreen screen, that's a special case. But for the average knowledge worker, I think that's pretty great.
Do you guys have? Yeah, go ahead, Michelle.
Oh, sorry. I know that. Well, I have two monitors, which helps a little bit in my home office. But when I'm stuck to one monitor, I usually put like my Slack on the right side and my work on the left side, which can be a little unfortunate in the age of video calls because it makes it harder to like look at the center of the screen, and that my coworkers know that yes, I am present. So I'll have to sort of readjust mentally on a 3.2 laptop, maybe my work up here and my Slack down here. But that's the only downside I can think of.
Do you guys have any insight as to why so many vendors decided to go with the taller screens this year? Because Andrew's been complaining about it for years. And as Avram just pointed out, around 10 years ago, 4:3 was the thing. So there was a switch, and now they're going back to taller screens. Why? Does anyone know why they are all kind of doing it this year?
Yeah, we've had a couple of companies sort of tell us that where the supply came from was as largely following television for a number of years. So when TV went high def and widescreen, all of the panels they could really get were 16:9. It was much more expensive and much more difficult for them to cut these custom size screens. And so that's why the entire technology industry followed. They followed televisions. And apparently now 16:10, like is now finally more available from more of the screen manufacturers. And 3x2, we're still seeing a little less of. That might be a little more custom. But when everybody's ordering a 16:9 screen and at the same resolution from TVs all the way down to laptops, there's just like some economy of scale there, right? And so laptops followed, and so did computer desktop monitors for that matter. But as more orders are slowly being taken, we're going to get more 16:10 because people want that, and the factories are able to produce it.
So we have a laptop question. I'm not sure if we're able to answer this or not, but have either of you checked out the ROG Strix Scar 17 G733? Thoughts to highs interested in the laptop for video editing?
That was announced this year, correct? We looked at a lot of machines, so I don't have it off the top of my head.
I believe that's their one with the 360. That's their option with a 360 hertz display for video editing. I mean, that is.
Oh, well.
Yeah, I mean, I don't, and that that depends on a lot of things, and I don't know your exact workflow. It's definitely a gaming laptop, and gaming laptops, for better or for worse, are also often used for productivity. So it's probably going to have the power for you if you can get and afford the right specs. If you really want the top of the line, I don't think we have the exact pricing on that one yet. But if you want to go up to like the 3080 and the 5900 HX, that's probably going to cost you a lot of money.
The only thing I can think of is, for video editing, you're not going to benefit from that high refresh rate. So you're paying for it when you don't necessarily need to. And also the screen won't necessarily be, made with color accuracy in mind. So that is one thing to keep note of. Yeah, we haven't had a chance to test it. Again, not being at the show, that's the unfortunate thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, if they wanted some more laptop recommendations, where could they go?
Oh, are you fishing for us to endorse our website?
Fine, I'll do it. Andrew has a list of the best gaming laptops and the best ultrabooks and premium laptops on our site. So you should check that out if you're looking for some more recommendations. There, I did it. So going back to our awards, and kind of relevant to the panel discussion we were just having, for best monitor this year, we often go with gaming monitors because we love gaming, but this year is actually a professional monitor from LG. And what makes it so special, it's the Ultrafine 32EP950. The name doesn't make it special. What actually makes it special is that it's an OLED monitor, and it's actually an accessible size. It's 31.5 inches diagonally. And that's a big deal because most OLED monitors, PC monitors, or panels that we're seeing are either giant or very, very large TVs. They're not the size meant to, sit comfortably on a desk. And so even the OLED PC monitors, most that we've seen, that we've tested, they were 55 inches. Alienware has its 55-inch OLED. But so this LG monitor coming out is actually, about 32 inches. So you could use it for on your desk, daily work and things like that. But one complaint we had, or I should say our managing editor, Matt Safford, pointed out is that this monitor comes with like a lot of ports, like DisplayPort, HDMI, USB-A, USB-C, but it doesn't come with Thunderbolt 4, which is not common, but LG announced a Thunderbolt 4 monitor this week as well. So when was it?
They said it wasn't this one, right? They were separate?
Correct, yeah. So the Thunderbolt 4 monitor is like a 40-inch ultra-wide professional monitor. So it'd be cool if we could combine OLED with a little bit of future-proofing with the Thunderbolt 4, especially because LG is going to come out with a product like that anyway. But yeah, we were still kind of impressed because it would be great to get OLED in, you know, a size that fits on our desk instead of like a TV or a phone. But you guys are lucky because you get OLED in a lot of laptops you test, I guess.
More and more of them, though, that often is it's often at the expense of the refresh rate.
Very top, and usually like combined with a 4K display, which is going to add more to the price and isn't something that everyone wants.
Yeah, I saw one 1080 OLED last year, and that was pretty great. But Sharon, what were the other types of monitors on it? You mentioned that we usually pick gaming monitors. What were the gaming monitors like at CES this year?
So I think a big trend this year was the inclusion of HDMI 2.1 for the 4K monitors, because that's letting you get up to 120 hertz refresh rate versus 60 hertz with HDMI 2.0, and this is all without compression. So we're seeing a lot of vendors. I want Acer, Asus, LG, ViewSonic. They all debuted their first HDMI 2.1 monitors, which is pretty cool. And that also has a console angle to it, of course, because the PS5 and Xbox Series X, they all support that. And another thing I was actually happy to see is there are a few monitors coming out with Nvidia Reflex, the latency analyzer, which before was only available in the 360 hertz monitors, which are obviously a niche product and at a premium because they're so fast. So it was kind of nice to see them introduce into some of the less premium or lower end monitors to make that more accessible. Although I guess you can argue like how much you need to check your latency if you're only at 144, 240. But yeah, if you could check out our review. Jared tested it. I think could be a pretty useful tool, especially if you want to like be as good as a pro gamer or like pretend you're a pro gamer. So it's cool that it's coming out in like a greater variety of screens. So we have a question from Javier. What do you think of using a TV like the LG 48CX, which has OLED, 144 hertz, and G-Sync for gaming? I mean, jealousy?
Yeah, that's a TV? What sort of inch? 48 inches, I assume.
No, I think they make it in smaller ones too.
Yeah, so maybe around like last year, LG started introducing G-Sync into its televisions, or G-Sync compatibility into its television. So yeah, I think that definitely changes the whole argument a bit for monitors versus TVs. I would say maybe the line is blurring a little bit. Oh, Javier says this is a 48-inch TV. Yeah, I feel jealousy. If you have enough space for that and enough, distance where you could take in all that 48 inches. But I think for a lot of people, they don't have that space. They need something that could fit on their desktop. And they also want something where they could like really lean in and really focus and on, the nitty gritty details and the people you're battling or fighting, whatever game you're playing. So it depends on your...
Sorry, I would love one like that for a console, right? Because like that's the thing where I'm sitting back and relaxing. If I was like playing competitive esports with a mouse and a keyboard and every millisecond matters and you can't have any input lag, then like, okay, maybe that's where a monitor still wins. But like for my actual needs, yeah, sure, why not?
I feel like the TVs again are still mostly for the console space as opposed to like PC. But I mean, just looking at 144 hertz and G-Sync for TV is already fairly impressive. The unfortunate thing about both TVs and monitors for me right now is the new consoles are coming out with the ability to support both high refresh rate and 4K, right? But,
both games have been like either or at the moment.
It's difficult to find, one TV that can do 4K and high refresh rate, even if, it's not at the same time, without paying too much money, right?
Yeah, and I can't speak to accuracy for because we happen to not test TVs, so I can't, attest to their accuracy. But some of a lot of the 144 hertz G-Sync monitors that we test are incredibly accurate. Like Delta E is under 3, like no visible color errors, great, or very little latency. So they're really high-end monitors that have more to offer than just speed. So that's something but I can't say the same for TVs, but that's only because we haven't tested them to that degree. Were you gonna weigh in here, Andrew?
No, I think we covered it.
All right. So we do have another question from a Sly Dog. Do you guys have any thoughts on the Asus A15 or A17, which has an AMD CPU? Do either of you remember what CPU exactly this has? There were so many laptops announced this year.
I have it pulled up, and I believe it's Ryzen 5000 mobile.
So this is a tough A15. I reviewed that in 2020. So that had an AMD chip and RTX, and that was a great combination. I mean, I guess we could it's RTX again this year. So I guess I would expect similar, similar performance, and they're bringing it up to 17 inches, which is always good. But Andrew, what do you think?
I mean, again, like the TUF laptops actually have a pretty solid reputation among like entry level and budget builds. They do have another one this year, which I'm going to try to bring up, but it's the Dash F15, which is meant to be like a little more portable as well. That also uses the latest Ryzen processors, and that one's supposed to be a little thinner. So if you're just looking at it for gaming and want to be on the go, that might be an option as well. But again, like this is definitely the type of thing where we're looking forward to getting them in to test as soon as we can.
That is the one nice thing, because Andrew, you kind of joked about this earlier with all our virtual briefings. We're like, how do we know like some of these products are even real?
They even exist. Yes.
Yeah, but it seems like the laptops are starting to make appointments for our labs. So
yeah, a lot of the laptops are scheduled to launch in end of January, beginning of February. So like we're actually hearing plans that like some of them will be hitting sooner rather than later, like Q1 of this year. So those will show up.
Yeah, it's not necessarily that release dates are delayed, but because we can't see these laptops in person, we're a little less able to talk about them right now.
Yeah, I mean, and then, that's kind of like with CES, a lot of the times, like Andrew said, like some of the products never come into existence, but the laptops are a little different.
Yeah, those typically show up.
So yeah, our topic was best and worst of CES. Andrew or Michelle, do any of you have any good or bad memories or thoughts that you want to just get out there? It's like therapy.
Okay, I will tell you one thing real quick, which is the first time when we were talking to the people at Razer, and out of sort of nowhere, this thing popped up
there you go
on the screen, and I will be completely honest, the first thing that popped up in my I verbally went no, and like my wife, who's working in the other, because she's also working from home, turns around like, what's going on, and like I couldn't show her because it was under embargo. But this is actually like a very CES product to me, and so I wanted to make sure we brought it up. We actually gave it the best concept, and the Razer concepts are kind of all over the place in that typically they don't come out in the form we see them, right? They're sometimes ideas from them come out. But this was actually, the more I thought of it, very thoughtful in a lot of ways. Like, yeah, okay, it's got gamer aesthetics, it has RGB, and that's kind of ridiculous. But the fact that there was something that like, okay, it's clear and you could read lips, it's meant to be comfortable, it has a recharging case. This was just like a very CES moment for me, in a CES where we didn't really get to see things anyway. And on the one hand, like I would have loved to see it in person. On the other hand, the idea of like trying it on after 150 other people have tried it on is kind of weird. But like the idea, like they had a prototype they showed on their Razer Store show. This was just a very CES moment to me. It was a company that does gaming things, sort of pivoting away a little bit, but keeping in their brand and saying, look what we can do. It was just very CES, and I missed being there in person intensely at that moment.
It's also very Razer too, right? Because Razer has, Razer gum. Razer's joked about the Razer Toaster. So now this is Razer.
The toaster is definitely real.
No, it's half fashion, but it's also half medical item. Which is interesting. Although that was probably my first concern when I saw it, was those little filters on the side, because I had read the CDC said masks with filters can actually like let air out. So if you're carrying the disease, they're going to help you, but they're not going to help anyone else. But, I asked in the right away, and they said it's two-way filtration. So the next question with that is those filters are replaceable. So you can like buy new ones. And so I asked like, how would we buy new ones? How often would we be expected to replace them? And unfortunately, they didn't have any more info for us at this time. But that feels like the big tech company gotcha to this. It feels like the electric toothbrushes and.
Like it's a concept. They do those every year. If that thing comes to market, I'm sure it won't be exactly as we saw it here. But I don't know. It was just so like, holy cow, and like the type of wow you like to get, even though it wasn't the typical thing we cover as a hardware site. It was still just like of the moment, and that was very CES to me.
Yeah, I used to be more split on fashion masks, but I think anything that gets people to like wear masks more frequently is good. And this comes with extra benefits, like it also enhances your voice, right? So some people are worried about masks dampening them, maybe if they're already not exactly loud spoken, soft spoken, that's the term. After CES your brain kind of changes. But if they're already
Matt, who said he wanted the Darth Vader voice changer, was what Matt said.
And you're wearing the mask, it can like dampen you, but this will help avoid that. And we joked a little bit with Razer, like, can you add in apps to change the voice to like Darth Vader or whatever? But it's supposed to serve a medical function, so you might have to hack that in.
Well, there's a Yeti mic that has World of Warcraft voice filters built in somehow. So the tech is there. We just gotta tweak it a little bit.
Zug.
So yeah, it looks like we are nearing the end of our show. Definitely subscribe to our YouTube channel, like our Facebook page, and special thanks to Sly Dog and Javier, because they already liked this video. So definitely like it if you like what you saw, and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss anything. We went live with over a dozen hardware vendors at CES this year. AMD, Intel, Kingston, Asus, a bunch more to discuss their CES announcements. So you can check out a lot of those cool demos and candid chats on our Facebook and YouTube page. And of course, our website has a bunch of news coverage. I know Andrew would be happy if you checked out our review of the new Asus ZenBook Duo, because we reviewed it and they announced it at the show. That was not easy to get up at the same time as covering the show. So you can check that out, and definitely check out the full list of Tom's Hardware CES award winners. We just went through a few just now, but there's a full list. So Andrew and Michelle, thank you for hanging out with me and reliving this busy week. That is our show. We'll see you next time.